Yeah, they did not take the transition to modern warfare very well. But yeah.
Would you like to play terrorists that took down the Twin Towers only a few years after? Is it too soon?
Yeah, they saw Modern Warfare 2, the No Russian mission. They're like, we gotta one-up them, guys. You know what I
they
thought
one-upped
of?
it all right.
9/11.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Thought Patrol podcast. It is me and Sean to grace your lovely ears tonight, or whatever time you're listening, wherever you're at. We hope you're doing good. But this is episode 209, part 2, because we did record at episode 209, and it was lost to the, what is it? Is it Annals of Time?
Dates?
The Annals of Time. I was
Annals.
Yeah,
of Time.
Of course, my first thought went to the Annals of Time, but
it's Annals of Time. I don't think anybody's ever. I don't know if there are two pronunciations of it. I've never heard Annals, but I've also never heard a British person say it. So
yeah, it's lost to time. So if you want that, you got to join the OnlyFans. That doesn't exist. So get on it.
It says you.
Yeah, true. Sean's been running an underground OnlyFans.
Yeah.
It's just feet pics.
Yeah, all pinky toes exclusively.
Oh. A very finely pedicured pinky toe, though.
Yeah.
Very finely pedicured pinky toe.
Yep, with a clear coat.
Oh, yeah, you got to pay extra to get the horse stuff, like the reds and blacks, you know.
Yeah, that takes more time to get perfect, you know.
Yeah, gotta get all dolled up.
Yeah, I want to get paid for that.
True.
Extra paid.
True. All right. What the fuck just happened for the last minute? Okay. Well, we're going to be talking about nothing important, as always. It's going to be very exciting. There really isn't much going on video game-wise. Like, recently, I can't really... Like, I know we got Gamescom coming up. It's on the 21st, I think it starts up. And there's always
a lot of interesting remasters coming out, remasters and re-releases of like older titles, which is pretty great that have just happened recently, like Lollipop Chainsaw and Tomba. Tomba is like a legendary 2.5D platformer from PlayStation 1 and 2 days, and Lollipop Chainsaw was like a slightly above average actioner that had a really great sense of humor, but it was kind of short, and it came out right about the time that people were bitching and moaning about attractive characters, so it ran into some difficulty, but it sold moderately well, but I wouldn't consider it a huge success. I'm very excited for both of those because I everybody knows I love my 2D platformers and my 3D platformers, and Toma is basically a 2D platformer of legendary status, so it's super, super good, and Lollipop Chainsaw is a lot of fun. Unfortunately, both of them are being published by what's that rerun, the one that rips people off, like you order it and then you get the product like 3 years later. Limited run games, but they also publish one of my favorite platformers, Shantae. So whatever, I'm still going to buy this stuff. They haven't turned themselves into super villains yet, like some of the big three. Or actually, is Square included now? Is it the big four?
I mean, I guess it depends on who you ask. I don't know what is. I mean, outside of like the adaptation of NFTs that quickly fell away, can't think of anything like super scummy that Square's done recently. But even the NFTs, I don't think by nature are scummy. They're just stupid. I don't necessarily think they're like super predatory things. We've seen like EA and Ubisoft do a lot worse.
I'd say we could easily include Konami, but that's more just because they're assholes.
Oh yeah,
it's not. I don't think their predatory shit has been any worse.
I will never forgive
Square's.
them for what happened to what they did to PT.
Yeah,
they will always be in my shit list.
Asshole, this should still count.
Yeah, I guess it just counts a different way. You know, it weighs a different way. Like when I think like EA, like Blizzard, Ubisoft, I think like general scummy behavior, like predatory, shitty behavior. Where other ones are just kind of like they just kind of suck. They generally kind of just suck. They don't want to make cool things, you know.
And EA
I was gonna say
purchased by anybody yet, so we can't count on them getting. I still don't know if Microsoft's going to clean up Activision because Microsoft's been doing some honky bullshit recently.
Yeah, they went out and they go out and they're like, we have no games, so let's buy studios to make games. Oh shit, we don't like the games the studios made. Now let's close said studios. Like what they did, the Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush was an
Yeah,
excellent fucking game.
they just got bought, by the way.
Yeah,
So
I heard.
and
Yeah,
they hired everyone back, or at least
yeah.
sent out offers for everyone to come back. So anybody that hasn't already picked up a new job is probably returning.
I wonder who bought them.
It was
Uh,
some foreign developer that is not Chinese.
Soul IP. Xbox Game Pass said Hi-Fi Rush is now TangoWorks Soul IP. No, Crafton.
That sounds right.
It's the publisher of PUBG. So they say I think that is Chinese, but
Is it? I thought it was a different
PUBG
publisher.
is. No, it says right here, Crafton. Hi-Fi Rush IP and Tango GameWorks acquired by Crafton or Crafton, the publisher for PUBG.
Ah, that makes me sad. I was hoping it was somebody else.
At least they got saved.
I do. I'm
Fuck
glad
Microsoft.
they got their jobs back, but I
Yeah.
really wish it had been someone else.
If you're listening, play Hi-Fi Rush. It's such a fun game. It's so good. It's got so much heart. It's really well made. It's such an excellent time. It's well written. The music's awesome. It's just an overall just it reminds me of like those types of games that give you like that kind of they put like in this state. You know a game's good where when you stop playing it and you go to do the rest of like your boring bullshit adult life stuff, you know you got to deal with. If a game is still you're still thinking about it while you're doing the rest of your shit throughout the day and it's just you're just enamored by it even when you're not playing it. That's how you know that game's fucking good. And Hi-Fi Rush did that to me. I just always thought about going back to play more of it and get back into it. It's awesome. And I think you can get it. It's not like a full price game, if I remember correctly. Googling it. I mean, shit, you get some of these places for like $10. So, if you do nothing else, if nothing else gets to your thick fucking skull, whoever's listening, play Hi-Fi Rush. Well, that is all. I'm glad they got they got bought out and saved or whatever. Yeah, but I don't understand that. I mean, I get not everything always works out as planned. I don't even know what the fuck the plan was with Microsoft, but I know the idea is to basically fill up Game Pass with a bunch of like games worth playing, right? And then that's like kind of their strategy now is it's less about console sales, it's less about software sales, but it's more about roping in like a couple million people into some kind of subscription service where they got them paying so much, kind of like Netflix, but game related, you know? And they're putting a
They're
lot of
also
their
trying to release multi-platform. Like they're stopping or they're easing up on Xbox exclusivity and starting to release on Sony and more on Nintendo. They've already done a little bit on Nintendo, but they've already put I think 2 or 3 games on Sony's platform.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always for that. I think it exclusivity doesn't make any sense. I don't think it ever did, but it makes even less sense today than it did back in the day because of the way everything's the same nowadays anyway. Like all these consoles are the same. They're basically just PCs. So I see less and less of a reason to have something exclusively exist on your platform, especially when these companies, I mean, we said this a million times before, but like a good portion of their income or the profit that they make is on software sales. Hardware sales they usually take a loss on because they're trying to sell them for cheap and get people in their ecosystem, and then they make it all back on obviously the bullshit subscription fee for online, which I think is fucking stupid. Always have, and then getting them in their ecosystem so they're buying their games, their software, and that's where they make a good portion of their money. Especially nowadays with everything being digital, you don't have to actually like put time and money into actually producing discs and shit like that, you know? So, I mean, I could see it working for Microsoft, but it's just it's like a big uphill climb to get to where they want to be, and you need a very extensive library um to get people to stay around too. So,
Consoles used to matter a lot more.
oh, definitely.
because they were handmade, well, not handmade, but they were bespoke hardware. So Sega's developing their own video chips and shit, or they're working in conjunction with Toshiba and Intel and etc. Same with Nintendo, same with Sony, and same with Microsoft. Everybody's kind of like custom building these video game devices to play video games using its own hardware architecture, its own software architecture. And so you were trying to figure out which one was going to give you the experience that you wanted, and which one. But it wasn't just that; it was also like who was going to have the best first-party titles, and then it was just who's going to have the best first-party titles. The rest of the shit like doesn't belong there, but the first-party titles I think should be exclusive. I think that's part of the draw now. That's the only thing that really draws it. Besides, what can you give me with your system what comes along with this Sony experience or the Microsoft experience that gives it the edge over the competition? It's like buying a DVD player or a Blu-ray player now. Like, which one of these is going to give me a better
Yeah, or like a TV.
experience along with watching my shit? Or or a
Yeah.
smart TV. Yeah,
No, yeah,
and it's a bit strange because that's not how consoles have worked for so long. And I think that as fucked up as Microsoft is, well, I mean, well, first of all, Microsoft has been pushing the industry in this direction for decades. They've wanted this since jump because it's a field that they've been playing in computers forever. So like they know this area. They've been trying to push video games here for a long, long time. But the other hardware manufacturers, Nintendo, Sony, this isn't really their realm of experience. And so like coming into this area, they're still trying to operate on the old ideas. Especially Sony's been clinging on like a drowning child. And unfortunately,
what
as
an
much as
image
I
to paint.
wish things didn't change so drastically, they have, and Sony has to adapt. And I'm curious to see what choices they'll make because right now Microsoft has the advantage. They're playing on their home turf. They've been dealing with the universal platform for a long, long time, so they know how to do this shit, and they've learned how to cooperate with Steam and Epic and GOG and all the other storefronts to where they can still succeed. So how is Sony going to approach this?
Um,
Because eventually
yeah,
the consoles just aren't going to mean shit anymore. They're not quite there, but they're just going to be pre-made PCs.
I think I think one of the problems is you're 100% right. There was a lot more focus on innovation when things were still fresh, but I think the problem we're at now is that the technology does not innovate as fast as it did when it originally came out. So the problem you're running
True.
into is these consoles, yeah, they're getting stronger, but there is no need for smaller scale innovation. A lot of it is just ramping up like how much power something can dish out nowadays. You've seen the same thing in computers where we're basically at a point where it's just a new card every once in a while and then the actual upgrades are incremental. They're a lot smaller than they would have been back in the day because the technology is kind of getting a point to where it's plateauing. So until we get like some kind of crazy shit that completely blows shit out of the water, but you'll even get to a point where even the graphical side of stuff will get to levels of fidelity that are harder and harder to distinguish from just a person playing it normally, you know? Um, like I don't know how many more pixels we could fit into a screen before I just don't see a difference anymore. It's just
Yeah,
not
the
going to
human
be.
eye's got limitations, even at its most maximum with the most
Yeah,
adrenaline and endorphins you've got going through your system, because you can see more when your shit's heightened. So even at that level, there's still a limit to what you can see. And
yeah,
after they've gotten to the point where they make games look real, what do you do then?
yeah. I don't even think we'll ever get to that point, and I think it'd be
I'm
weird
not
too.
really
I don't like the
in want
idea
of
of
it.
being in an FMV kind of thing, you know? Like it those things always felt weird to me. So I do appreciate the efforts, and also you see there was a big push as we were moving into like last gen and then this gen on a focus on like graphical fidelity. Always big pushes, making things more cinematic, look good, and all that effort to do that, you saw other things start to suffer on the idea of a video game, so like gameplay elements suffering, all for the approach of like making things cinematic, movie like, more lifelike. And we've seen kind of an idea of a step back where there's more and more things getting popular nowadays that people are clamoring for that are more of a focus on what I feel are more important with games, which is like the gameplay, how it feels, and stuff like that. Like you saw, like Helldivers. Now, Helldivers looks good. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of what drove people to that game initially was the sandbox and the gameplay they created. It was just because the game was just fun, just a fun environment. Now, say what you will about it. Now, it's here or there, but that's like I like seeing that more devs are putting just wholehearted focus and accomplishing that step first before we worry about making things like stupid cinematic. And I mean, I think Sony will always be there because that's kind of like the environment they've um, nurtured. So they're kind of like sleeping in the bed they made. But I think their games still sell pretty well. I don't know how they'll adapt to. I know they did. They did. Didn't they try some kind of stupid? They have PlayStation Plus, obviously, and I know they give games away for free. But I remember them talking about having some kind of subscription service in the books. It was like something like Centurion or
I
some
don't know, but
stupid shit.
they still have a subscription service where it's like Microsoft's thing where you can download a game or stream it. I think it was just streaming for a while. I think you can download them now, but they have a streaming game service like Luna. They've had that up for ages, and it was just for, or most. It wasn't for current games as far as I remember. It was mostly uh, fifth and sixth gen games.
Yeah,
I don't think it was like cross console stuff. It was just because the PS1 was fifth gen and the PS2 was sixth gen. It was those. It was all. It was like backwards shit. It was like those, and also the seventh gen, the PS3. I think they had PS3 games on there. They started putting those on, but the first ones was the PS1 and PS2 games that they used to sell on the PlayStation 3 store were moved over to the PlayStation 4 store. But instead of being moved over for sale, they were no longer for sale. Instead, they glued them into this streaming service because it pissed me off because I had a bunch of those PS1 and PS2 games purchased on my Vita. And so I wanted to play them on the PS4 because I thought my ownership would carry over, and it didn't. They instead glued them into the service.
yeah. See, it looks like they just.
Like,
It looks like it's just attached as an optional thing for PlayStation Plus. So they'll have like extra, which is 15 a month, and they have premium, which is 18 a month, and then when you
oh,
get into
you're
the
talking
higher
about,
tiers,
yeah,
I'm talking
you
about
get
like an
extra
alternative
games.
to Game Pass. Yeah, so like if
Yeah.
you pull premium, you're getting up to 340 additional games across PlayStation generations. PCS3 games are available only for streaming. Something about the unique cell chip architecture making it extremely difficult to emulate, which I've heard that a million times. But
Yeah,
I can
the Cell was
emulate
like a
PS.
super advanced processor, but it was ridiculously hard to write for.
Yeah, I can emulate PS3 games on my computer, so I don't know what's stopping them from doing it. But
Probably because they're well, no, I wouldn't say that's true either. I was gonna say because they insist on perfect emulation, which is what I would want. I would want a one-to-one gameplay experience to what it was before, even an improvement on that experience if possible. But you can't do one-to-one with PS3 games, or you can might be bring it close, but I don't know. I haven't heard of anyone telling me that they could emulate a PS3 game perfectly. And for the longest time, they couldn't emulate N64 games perfectly. It's still difficult. And N64 is kind of a much simpler architecture.
I know that there'd be a way to find a way if they gave a damn. But I just don't think they give a
Probably.
damn. Yeah.
But Sony like was by the PlayStation 3 era, I should say by the revamp of the console, they had abandoned the whole geese that they used of being like consumer friendly, because for a long time they were backwards compatible. They constantly incorporated new ideas and new features into their consoles, and they didn't charge you an arm and a leg for it, and they were like very forward thinking, and they were very consumer friendly in the price area. They still, at the very least, allow you to upgrade your own hard drives, which is kind of a nice feature. But I expected them to abandon that at any moment when they saw how much money Microsoft was making off of charging people to buy bespoke ones instead. I mean, and Sony is notoriously sticking with their shitty ass custom memory cards for their handheld systems, where they charge like 8 times what the fucking thing was worth because they wouldn't let you buy your own.
Yeah, I was looking into it more, the Microsoft stuff, and so they shut down 4 studios when they shut down with the Hi-Fi Rush One Tango Gameworks being one of them. They also shut down Texas. They shut down Arcane Austin, what did they work on?
The last one was
Was
the
that?
vampire game that went to shit. And before that, they worked on Prey and some other stuff.
Oh, Prey was such a good. They work on all the Dishonoreds too.
Yeah.
Damn, that sucks.
Yeah, all you gotta
Weren't
do
they?
is
Wait, wait,
fail
wait.
once.
Weren't they working on the new Blade game though? I thought Arcane was working on that new Blade game that they announced. I wonder if that's axed.
If Arcane was working on it, they're not. Nobody's working on it now because they didn't. No projects were picked up after they were culled.
Oh, it's Arcane Lion. I guess it's one of their subsidiaries. I guess. No, it says Arcane Lion is the studio behind the Dishonored series and Deathloop. Maybe it's like a sub thing. Maybe the Prey team wasn't the team that worked on Dishonored. Well, at least they're still around. I loved Prey. Prey was such a good game. Dishonored was really good too. I hear Caitlin screaming in the distance because those are like her favorite games of all time.
You know, Prey is considered a failure.
I know commercially it was. Yeah,
Like,
I know it
critically,
didn't do
everybody
really
loved
well.
it.
Yeah.
But commercially, like, it did not sell well.
I think it had something to do. I remember them. I never saw a single fucking thing about Prey advertising wise. So I don't know how much they dumped into like the budget for advertising, but that can kill a game so easily. If they're not getting its name out there, because word of mouth will only carry you so far.
Knew.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Like, you and I were watching it from the moment it was announced.
I didn't know about it until after.
For it up until I think I played the first hour of it.
Oh, you know, maybe I did. So I remember
it was a little bit. Yeah, we were talking about it from the moment it was announced because I was excited for it because I thought it was going to carry
from the
on
old
from
Prey. Yeah,
right, and you were excited for it because you were into the immersive sim genre, which I didn't even know that was the genre label until you gave me an education on that. I
the
called
System
it
Shock
entirely
games
different.
and stuff. Yeah, it's crazy that like if like System Shock and Deus Ex back in the day never came out, we wouldn't have gotten stuff like BioShock like that we have today and shit like that. You know,
BioShock just doesn't. While much more fun game than it looks on the outset, BioShock doesn't feel like those games.
It's very much.
It's much more streamlined.
It is. It is. It's kind of like the Halo to like Unreal Tournament, kind of where they made like a dumber version they could put on consoles. You know, like when Bungie was making Halo, they looked at the FPS market on PC and they're like, how can we adapt this to a like a dumber down, not necessarily the people, obviously. I'm not trying to be mean, but like the way you play the game. Controllers are a less accurate version of controlling a video game. So they had to find a way to design those fast-paced shooters and slow them down, but keep the sandbox cool, like what they had in Unreal and what they had in Quake and stuff like that, and keep it still like an arena style where you're dealing with weapon respawns and power-ups on the map, and then that's what Halo came out of, you know? I don't know why I keep saying, you know. Sean, if I say it again, I give you permission to slap me. Reach your hand through the computer and slap me. I don't know why I keep fucking saying, you know.
At this point in time, I can just drive over there.
Yeah, true.
I think there were other shooters on consoles before Halo, but I don't think anything, not even GoldenEye, and its legendary status, blew up in the way that Halo did.
Oh, definitely. I
think it was just because Halo was so easy to put in so many hands.
Yeah,
like the N64 was expensive. It didn't have that many A-list games. It really didn't. Most of them were first party. And it wasn't seen as a mature gaming console because Nintendo still had that stigma. Even after they allowed Blood Mortal Kombat and stuff like that, Nintendo was still seen as kind of like a console that kids or people that grew up playing Nintendo still played. So if you wanted a mature console, you got the PlayStation. And so, like the PlayStation, if I remember correctly, cleanly outsold the Nintendo 64. I think the entire run. The only thing that lost to those two was the Saturn. So you know, but I think that you just had less people with access to that. So when Xbox came out, Xbox wasn't Microsoft has never seen Nintendo as a competitor. They've never really tried to grasp that same audience. I think that in one sense they did with their stupid little Microsoft characters, the ones that were like Miiverse kind of things. I think that they tried for a moment to step in Nintendo's arena and it did not compete. And they said, fuck it, we're done. And then they went back to just competing with Sony.
mean the little avatar guys?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that was their like that and like the Connect, and both of those were
Oh
failures.
yeah, the Connect was a nightmare.
And yeah, the Wiimotes weren't amazing, but like they did what they were supposed to do, and it was up to you to program a game that could use it or not. And they could only do so much, but if you designed your game right, then it could use them. It just wasn't super awesome. But
Uh,
yeah, Microsoft mostly fought for the same audience that Sony did.
yeah,
So when you have a small handful of first-person shooters on Sony that may be decent but haven't like made an enormous name for themselves, and then you have Halo come out, and Halo is just easy to get in the hands, easy to get a hold of. They had a massive fucking campaign for it.
oh yeah,
Sony
the
never
ads
launched
for
a
were all
massive
over the
campaign.
place. Yeah, no, it was
I think
100%. They're like, we can run with this. We're gonna make it our baby.
yeah, I think it was really, I think Halo's success, I would attribute 100% to Microsoft's ad campaign on that first game. They busted their asses. They got Mountain Dew in their pocket. They got a couple, and Mountain Dew still to this day is partnered with Microsoft or with every Halo release.
Yeah, I think
Like,
I wonder. It's so hard to do stuff like that, like historical what ifs and shit. But I'm thinking like, what if Halo like received like literally zero advertisement? I wonder how far word of mouth would have carried it back then, because the environment back then was so different. I mean, internet was still very, it was new-ish at that time. We had boards, we had shit like that. YouTube was, when did YouTube start? YouTube was around the time Halo CE came out, right? Because Halo CE was the early 2000s.
mm, I'm looking that up right now actually, because I remember Red Faction being huge is when it came out as well, and I'm curious which one was first because Red Faction was 2001 and Halo
Halo CE was
was
original Xbox.
2001. They both came out the same year. The thing about Red Faction is Red Faction felt more like one of those before they didn't have the term at the time, but it felt more like the immersive sim. And up until that point in time, first-person shooters on PC were either leaning more toward Quake or an Unreal Tournament and Doom and shit like that, where you were either running through levels and shooting monsters, finding key cards, opening doors, and that was pretty much it. Or it was more like it was like an adventure game where there was like a story involved, like Turok and the first Unreal before it became a tournament. And those games, while selling well, were never like none of them hit legendary status. Turok is fondly remembered by the people that played it, but it didn't blow up and take the world by storm. Neither did the first Unreal. None of those first-person shooter adventure games did. And Red Faction sat somewhere in between the immersive sim games, which were big only on PC, and the first-person shooter adventure games like Unreal, which were thick with story and depth and whatnot.
Yeah, YouTube was
And so, and I
2005.
think Halo is almost like a halfway point between, or I'd say it's like 60% Red Faction and 40% like arcade perfection in terms of like easy to play, easy to pick up, easy to understand. It didn't really have a lot of complexity or depth to it. It was very straightforward. And I think the combination of its straightforward nature and the skill of the voice acting and the pacing, it was extremely well directed. I think Halo was just a very well made game for when it came out.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it definitely I mean like the ads were 100% important, but Halo still needed to actually carry that weight, you know? I said, again. Fuck. Halo still needed to carry that weight. It 100% did. Like you can peddle a piece of shit all you want, but people aren't going to enjoy it. No matter how much you shove it in their face. So Halo being just good on top of all that, it was a fucking phenomenon back then. It was crazy. I remember when I think Halo ODST, I went to do like the those GameStop those GameStop overnight things. You wait for the game to come out. That was the first time I
Oh
ever
yeah,
did it. Was for
yeah.
Halo
There was at
ODST.
least 3 sequels for Halo that they did that with.
Yeah. So
I don't think Halo should get credit for popularizing first-person shooters on consoles, though. I think that's a misnomer because there is a lot of success in that area prior to that point in time. I just don't think that anything gained the notoriety like Halo did. And before Halo, it was GoldenEye, and then you had GoldenEye was the one that brought console shooters home, that brought first-person shooters home. That really deserves the credit that you were giving Halo earlier. But GoldenEye again. I think that was just a much narrower scope in terms of audience. Now, it was still huge. Everyone that had a 64 had GoldenEye. There was like 6 kids who didn't. I was one of them. But I had the spiritual successor. I had Perfect Dark. So I still got the GoldenEye experience, and I could go to a friend's house and play GoldenEye or borrow it anytime I wanted. And I think before I sold my 64 back when I was in an act of desperation for money, I think I did actually end up having a copy of GoldenEye. But GoldenEye did for first person shooters what you were talking about. But I think what Halo did was it brought it to a much wider
yeah,
audience
I
because I think the
guess
install base for the Microsoft consoles was just much larger than the install base for the Nintendo
I think
64.
to clarify, I don't mean. Well, I said FPS. I don't necessarily mean. I mean FPS as we know them today, where they are like you have dual sticks doing what they're doing, where one's walking, one's looking. That all was like Halo bringing that in front of everyone's eyes, right? Like GoldenEye was cool. GoldenEye made FPS cool on console, but like they all controlled like ass. Like Perfect Dark, really cool game. It controlled like fucking ass because we did not have a dual stick. The what people call like the golden standard of FPS on console is that dual stick setup. And I know 100% Xbox didn't do the dual sticks first. It was what PS2. I think they were the first controller to have dual sticks on it because the PS1 100% did not. But I know PS2 had them.
No, the PS1 had dual sticks, and
Not dual
starting
sticks. It
around.
had
It did eventually have dual sticks, but it was like a
what
year or
year?
two into its life before they released them.
Oh shit! I thought it was. It's been a while. But I guess I meant more like when you think of FPS in a more modern sense. Um, Halo was like kind of like the first to throw that in front of a bunch of people's faces, like that idea.
It wasn't the first one to use it, but it was the first one to popularize it. The first one to use it was Alien 3 on PlayStation 1.
Yeah,
Alien Trilogy, I think it might have been called, or Alien Resurrection, something like that. It was an Alien game.
and rip Alien games. 99% of those
And if
fucking
it wasn't
suck.
that, it was Medal of Honor, but I'm pretty sure it was an Alien game.
I remember playing a really cool Medal of Honor game out on the 360 where you had to like parachute down onto the map. You're like an air trooper. I think it was a little called Medal of Honor Airborne. And it was cool because the way they had it kind of set up was because you had to parachute down on the map, there'd be objectives scattered throughout the area. You got to decide exactly how you wanted to tackle the level every time. So it added a bunch of really cool replayability because you literally pick where the fuck you wanted to go. It was such an interesting idea for like a campaign for a shooter.
The Medal of Honor games, when they were still tackling World War II, up until they tried to move into the modern era and ended up allowing you to play as what was it, Bin Laden's forces or something like that.
Augers.
Uh, they just made a bunch of bad decisions. But the first handful of Medal of Honors, the first I think 2 or 3 on PS1, and then there was 2 or 3 on PlayStation 2. They had one on computer. Those games were excellent, especially the first handful because Steven Spielberg directed those games, so they had this very cinematic feel. They were super, super good, and they were the gold standard of like an amazing World War II shooter. And Call of Duty tried to compete and was slightly more realistic and a little less cinematic, but otherwise a very, very similar experience. And it wasn't until I think Medal of Honor kind of when Call of Duty said, you know what, I think it's time for us to move away from World War II. and started doing Modern Warfare. And then Medal of Honor, nobody fucking looked at anymore because everyone was tired of fucking World War II. And after that, like that franchise just continued to shoot itself in the foot. And it's very dead now.
Yeah. Yeah, they did not take the transition to modern warfare very well. But yeah.
Would you like to play terrorists that took down the Twin Towers only a few years after? Is it too soon?
Yeah, they saw Modern Warfare 2, the No Russian mission. They're like, we gotta one up them, guys. You know
Oh,
what
well,
I
they
thought
one-upped
of?
it all right.
9/11.
Yeah. So you want to when you played the teams, you know, when you did the death match or whatever, one side was in the Medal of Honor ones, one side was the Russian guys and one or the Russian analogs, and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other
Russian
side
quote
was the
unquote.
American analogs. And in the Medal of Honor, one side was the USA United Forces or whatever, and then the other side was the Taliban, and,
Hog.
and that just did not go over well at all. And honestly, there were not a lot of dumber decisions they could have made. That wasn't the wisest playbook that they could have gone with. They didn't really have to even say that they were sides, but they wanted to compete with fucking Call of Duty, so they went there.
Yeah. So
Oh, I found a quote. Hold on,
okay.
you'll like this.
All right.
For Alien Resurrection PSX review and GameSpot,
Oh
October
no.
2000. This game's control setup is its most terrifying element. The left analog stick moves you forward, back, and strafes left and right, while the right analog stick turns you and can be used to look up and down.
It's like what happened to me doing it with the bumpers, like in PS1.
What's going on? This is crazy.
That dude was not. He did not guess the future. Imagine him
No,
now,
no.
sitting in his
I'm
rocking
curious
chair.
who
Yeah,
wrote that and what
yeah.
their career path is now.
That reminds me of the IGN review where they're complaining about one of the Pokemon games. They gave it like a 7 out of 10, and they said too much water, and it became like a fucking meme. Oh my goodness.
Too much water.
Yeah, I think it was
And then they released a
Diamond and
Zelda
Pearl.
game that's entirely water.
Yeah, man, that game's so fucking good. I love Wind
I
Waker.
love Wind Waker.
Yeah.
I think Wind Waker is the last one I consider thoroughly loving. Like I really liked the Skyward Sword,
Mm-hmm.
although the plot was a little bit beyond me. But I liked Twilight Princess a lot. But I loved Wind Waker. Once I realized it was connected, I think I was into it and it was fun, and I really loved the visuals and how expressive his face was. But once I got to that area where you were in the Hyrule from like Nintendo 64, and I was like, "What?" And then like I was, my mind exploded.
Yeah.
That was
I
that moment.
fucking I love Twilight Princess. That's crazy. For some reason I was thinking Twilight Princess came out before Wind Waker. I don't know why. But yeah, I think if the last one I truly loved was probably Twilight Princess. Be honest, I played Phantom Hourglass on the DS, and that one was kind of cool too. You had like
I think
a
that was in the same world as that was
it was
after
after
Wind
Wind
Waker, wasn't
Waker.
it?
Yeah. Well, it's very
Because there were two,
similar. I don't know
three.
how. The story is a fucking nightmare, but it was very similar because the world still has areas that were overfilled with water and shit.
Well, there's
So,
one of them that was
and it
an
had the
enemy
cell
that was
shaded. It had the cell shaded visuals too.
I think it was the train one that wasn't a follow up to, because there was Phantom Hourglass, there was the train
I
one.
think the train one was fucking Spirit Tracks or some bullshit.
Yeah, which is not one of them is not a follow up to Wind Waker, and one of them is. One of them is a follow up
I'm
to
about to
one of the
Google
other
it.
timelines.
I need to know.
I don't remember.
Let's see. So we have Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. It takes place after the events of Legend of Zelda Wind Waker.
Okay, that's the one that's the sequel to Wind Waker
And then
then.
Spirit Tracks takes place 100 years after Phantom Hourglass, apparently.
Okay, so they are in the same universe. I was mistaken.
They're so fucking like loosely connected though. I wouldn't blame you any other way because it's a fucking nightmare.
Once they decided that they were going to have them all be, because originally they were all just one shots that used the same characters. There were themes that carried over, but you didn't connect them. And then fucking one guy with the name of like Shinji or Akira or some shit like that was like, you know what? No, let's do this. And they sat down and realized that it couldn't fucking work. So they made 3 timelines and one core area until it branches. So there's like 1, 2, 3 games before the timelines branch, and then Ocarina of Time is what creates the branch.
You're
There's
giving me a headache just talking about it, bro.
yeah, I'm not
It's
even
such a
trying. I won't
nightmare.
explain it any further. Nobody gives a shit about this stuff. Just me. But and like and so the but yeah, that's it. The first one in the game series is Skyward Sword, I think, if I remember correctly. That's the
Yeah, I think
first one
that's the
chronologically
oldest. Yeah,
speaking.
that was their first like iteration of those of Link and Zelda and
Hmm.
Ganondorf. I don't
And there's
remember.
only 3 games where they're lovers, and that's one of them.
Oh,
Um,
I'd love Zelda. My dick on her face.
I think the
That's what
newer
love is,
one,
kiddos.
they're in a relationship, and one of the other ones they're in a relationship,
Dude,
and
the
I think the
newest
Nintendo one, the original Nintendo game, they're in a relationship. There's like 4, maybe 5 of them, but
in the
most of them they're
newest
not
one,
involved.
the newest iteration of Zelda, she got a yacht, bro. She got an ass. Nintendo knew what they
I
were
know
doing.
you sent the picture around for like
Yeah.
6 months,
She
like
got an
every third
ass.
day. You're
That
like,
was the
did I show
best
you
part.
this?
That was the best part about that game. Fuck all the other shit that happens in that game. But that Zelda, that version of her is what gave me life to continue going on. All right. So our question is to Microsoft is what the fuck you doing, bro? Stop canceling game studios. It's
You'd
uh
made a comment a while ago that I wanted to reply back to, and I don't remember what it was now.
was it about the
Because I wanted
Microsoft
to point
stuff?
out, you were talking about games being more of something than fun.
Oh,
And I
more
remember
cinematic than fun.
there was a problem in the 6th gen, which is the PlayStation 2 era, where they were more stylish than fun.
Okay.
And that was the like you didn't see that come around until the Devil May Cry. And the first Devil May Cry combined stylish and just they like everything they did, they made sure the hero was badass looking, the environments were badass looking, your combos looked badass, like you always felt like fucking Dante, and that you were just awesome at what you did. And even if you died, like the fucking ass whooping you dished out before you died looked badass. Like you just, it was always very stylish. So then they released Devil May Cry 2, and they amped up the style meter like crazy. Everything looked amazing. The gameplay was a little on the boring side. The fun factor had been dialed down in place of making everything so stylish. And then you saw that carrying across amongst a million other fucking games on every console. All of a sudden, everything had to look just Billy Badass, super awesome, glistening and fresh and covered in baby oil. The first Gungrave that I told you about, that game did not do well for the same reason. I loved it, but like it's I mean you could beat the whole game in like 2 hours, and it was a full price game.
Oh jeez.
And it was all style over substance. It was not difficult at all.
Yeah.
There was no challenge to it. There was no, I mean, you could sleep your way through it. The plot was barely there. There was a whole slew of games that came along that were like that. And the Devil May Cry team that did Devil May Cry 2 got screamed at for like 6 months. I remember one of the guys was talking in an interview. He's like, yeah, they let us know they weren't happy. They made
Yeah.
it very, very clear for a very long time. And so they went back to the drawing board before Devil May Cry 3 was released. And then the team that was supposed to be working on Bayonetta actually put it off to the side for a while to revamp like how they wanted to approach the game to make sure that it didn't suffer the same fate. Because it was in the talks. They were talking about making it back when 2 came out. And they didn't release it until around the time of Devil May Cry 4.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah, I
there was a
mean,
whole wave of like games that were more pretty to look at than fun to play.
yeah, I think it's an ebb and flow. I know that's one thing I'll always think is a really cool positive about where the gaming industry is right now is that it's so easy to make games now that people that have interesting and creative ideas and know how to get them into a format where we can play it and like test those ideas to see how good they actually are. It's so is the easiest it has ever been. So it's cool. I mean, it does flood the market with a bunch of shit, don't get me wrong. But
Shovelware.
when you're in, say you they have a specific area of games you really like and they've been failing you, you now have so many options to go find stuff that won't. You know, like we talk about all the time, the AAA space has been failing gamers for a very long time. They still continue to fail gamers, but we have so many other options nowadays from different indie studios to different like single A and double A studios and all this other shit that it really doesn't matter. AAA will continue to waffle and I don't really feel like it will overall impact my enjoyment of games because there's just so many fucking options. And we said that a million times. So I'll stop yapping. We got some we got some fucking
I
mailbag
know. It
questions.
just sucks because we're watching major franchise after major franchise just evaporate and get destroyed because they're mishandling everything.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's a natural thing. We all have to deal with it. Shit dies, but you
Yep.
never want to see it happen, and it's
Yeah.
never
And
a
there,
comfortable thing to happen. So it's just things that we have to deal with, and
yeah.
it's
Some of these
shitty.
studios are taking them down, kicking and screaming too. it's not a nice peaceful death. They're fucking stabbing him, and he's not passing out yet from the loss of blood. He's just screaming.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's your social media for you. These people have voices. Now they can make them heard. When you shuttered a studio in the 2000s, the internet was there, but people weren't fucking reading Twitter 24/7. They weren't on Facebook all day. The 90s, nobody fucking knew that shit. People didn't have voices then.
All right.
You'd have to go to an actual news outlet and sit down and do an interview and hope somebody reads it or hope somebody watches the program. But now you can say something on Twitter, you can say something on, what is it, Threads, or put a video out on YouTube or some shit like that, and that shit'll get picked up and splattered everywhere. Now, if those big guys fire somebody, people hear about it. Like the fucking people that the Hi-Fi Rush studio, like the guys, like we had no fucking idea. We were like fine one day and then gone the next, and we really thought we were good because we've been putting out quality content. So yeah, no, we didn't expect this. We didn't see this coming, and then we weren't warned.
All right, we got mailbag questions. If you guys want to write in a mailbag, feel free. Look in the links below in the description wherever you're listening. Send us some questions. We want to hear from you guys. I think about the show. It could be literally about fucking anything. We like the smell of our own farts. I don't know. Just feel free to ask us. We want to hear from you guys. But we're going to go ahead and start with the first one we got from Prequel Lover 69 from the Discord. It says, "Hey bros, don't know if you saw, but I'm watching Tarzan right now and it made me excuse me. It made me think.
Which Tarzan?
I'm assuming the original animated Disney one. Considering the rest of this question, what is the best animated movie ever made?" What kind of fucking question? How the fuck am I supposed to answer that? Bonus points if that movie made you cry. Love you guys. So freaking happy the show is back. Heart emoji. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're glad to be back. We're glad you guys are excited to continue the journey with us. So, best animated movie ever made. That is such a hard fucking question. I think if I had to say one that had like the most impact on me, it would have to be one of the Ghibli films, I think. Whether it be Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke. I also really like Kiki's Delivery Service. I think all of those movies are masterclass. They're like fucking phenomenal. And obviously old Disney stuff is also very good too. I've always enjoyed the OG Disney stuff. But they always, I don't know, they always kind of felt like they were specifically made for kids usually. I don't know, not specifically. Maybe that's the wrong word.
Well,
But
Ghibli movies were made for children.
yeah, they were too. I don't know, I just didn't feel it. It's probably just because I'm a fucking weeb. That's probably the answer. But I
Well, you
fucking
can make something with a target audience, but still make sure that it's appealing to people outside of the target audience.
oh yeah, they do it all the time.
Ghibli's no different than Disney in that respect.
Yeah.
Ghibli, sorry.
It's a hard question. I don't really know. But it'd definitely be something, I think something in that lineup. Tarzan's an excellent movie, by the way. The Disney Tarzan movie, so fucking good. The Phil Collins soundtrack, so fucking good.
I'm more a fan of the soundtrack than the film.
Oh, it's been a while since I've seen it, so
Well, the song specifically, I got a soft spot for Phil Collins.
yeah.
I don't know. I think Perfect Blue is masterclass.
Yeah, Satoshi Kon
And
is really good too.
yeah, I think despite its flaws,
Didn't he also do Wolf
and
Children? That was also a really fucking good movie. Or maybe that was someone else. Didn't Satoshi Kon do Wolf Children? Let's see. Oh yeah,
I think
Perfect Blue is
despite
such
its
a good movie.
flaws, I think that Akira is still masterful. And it is extremely flawed. There's huge chunks of it that just got dropped out that would have made the narrative make more sense. Huge parts of the book that didn't make it in. As it stands, the story in the movie doesn't make a ton of sense. You kind of have to really, it's not perfect, but I think still with what they did manage to get made, I'm looking forward to see the remake movie. It's the same team that worked on it before. They just have more time and they're trying to get the whole story in this time. But I think the original Akira was still profound. Uh, the Watership Down, I think, was amazing for what it was. Um, the Tokyo Godfathers.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
Satoshi Kon. I think a lot of
uh,
it, I loved a lot of his movies. Paranoid Agent was cool
yeah,
too. I like Paranoid Agent.
that was a series.
Oh, you're right. We're on movies.
You
Sorry, I'm getting too excited.
know. um,
I never saw Paprika.
the for Disney,
It's just animated movies in general.
I know, but Disney definitely has to have a hand in there. Although I'm more leaning more towards Don Bluth films, like The Secret of Nim, I think was amazing. For Disney, I think The Great Mouse Detective is is a perfect film. Um, I think that Treasure Planet and Journey to Atlantis deserve honorable mentions, even if they aren't the best I've ever seen.
I love
But
Treasure
the ones that
Planet.
I
Those
am
aren't Disney
mentioning
though.
by name,
But
huh?
yeah, yeah. Treasure Planet
Those are
wasn't
both
Disney.
Disney.
Treasure
Yeah.
Planet was a Disney film?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh shit, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, Emperor's New Groove.
Oh God, yeah.
I
Emperor's New Groove
fucking
is a fucking
love those
amazing movie.
movies.
That's a
Oh
really good
my
movie. Disney
god.
didn't deserve that one. Um, there's so many good animated films that it's really kind of it's I if you asked me on another day, it was like trying to ask me my favorite movie. There's some easy go-tos, but it depends on my mood and how I'm feeling and
Yeah.
what I'm remembering at the time. The Last Unicorn is another one of the best animated films ever made, and too many people haven't seen that one. And technically speaking, that could count as an anime. It was designed to be in the English language, but it was done by a Korean Japanese team.
Can we
It
ask
was the same
Disney?
studio that did the old Hobbit movies and did the old Bible cartoons,
Yeah.
which I think is a Japanese studio, but I think they're partially staffed. They have a Korean staff too. I could be wrong
I'd like to
about that
petition
Korean part.
Disney to get the fuck away from 3D and go back to hand drawn 2D stuff, please.
Yeah, the last hand drawn
Thank you
movie
for
they
coming to
did
my
was,
TED
well,
talk.
digital, but I think it was The Princess and the Frog, which the only redeeming or the best redeeming part about that movie is the fact that Keith David was in it.
Oh.
Um, I know that there are other animated films that I would love to mention that I just can't fucking think
Oh
of
yeah,
right now.
it's a hard
Up
ass
is a
question.
brilliant one, if that counts. It's
Hey,
digital
yeah,
animation,
it
but it's really
does.
good.
It's animated.
Um, was it Ants? I think was really good.
I remember enjoying Ants.
I also really enjoyed A Bug's Life. Uh, I liked Monsters and Aliens, but I don't think that Concept necessarily the best movie ever. I don't know. The first thing that came to my mind was Perfect Blue. That movie is just stellar, and I can't recommend it enough. And Japan's had lifetimes of doing animated films, and I think they've got an edge on it for sure. Another one, what's his name? The guy that does I like every movie he's ever done. He
What?
did Your Name and
Oh, Shinkai.
yeah, everything that Shinkai has ever done is the best movie ever made. Like I love every
Yeah,
single one
your
of his
name's
movies.
excellent. Uh,
That's another one. Yep.
Also
And
Kyoto Animation with a silent voice. That movie,
that's another one.
we did bonus points. That movie did not only make me cry once, but multiple times. Excellent
And the
film.
storytelling, the visual storytelling they used was
Oh,
fucking
I
unbelievable.
was bawling at the end with the whole
The
final.
masks falling
Yeah,
off.
the whole final bit with the X's falling off. That shit destroyed
Yeah,
me.
I wasn't ready for that because I was like, how are they gonna? And then when they did it, I was like, holy shit, that's powerful. Like I was not ready for that.
Yeah, that movie was
Like it
excellent.
was really really good. Like those are two films that absolutely have to be mentioned as best animated films ever made. And you can't. God, I can't remember the fucking. There's this the fuck the guy who did Fritz the Cat, and he did a bunch of like sexual comic books and shit like that back in the day. He's kind of a legendary animator. He did Cool World and fucking I don't know. I know he released a movie in the 70s
Well,
that
the
was
dude's name is
very much
Robert Crumb.
Crumb. Yeah, Crumb.
Uh,
He had a movie called American Something that was like pretty fucking amazing. Got a lot of fucking love for that movie.
what a name for a movie, Coonskin. Jesus. Just
Believe it
shut.
or not, his movies were against racism. But because of that, they used black caricatures, but they used them with a positive message.
Yeah.
Hard to uh,
Yeah, but if I was,
explain without you seeing it.
I guess to add to this, if I was to recommend a single film for you to watch and you're listening, um I'm gonna make mine a silent voice because I fucking adore that movie. Not only have I watched it several times, I've shown it to several people, my family members. I've watched people react to it online several times. I fucking adore that movie. It is good. Your Name's good too, but it's very high. It gets very high fantasy.
I still love it. I
Yeah,
still
but
love it just as much.
I think the writing in that and the characterization is fucking incredible. It is so good. Of even like to the way they had the voice actors and their mannerisms because they're basically playing Freaky Friday. They're switching bodies and stuff, and the way they speak, the voice actors had to like adopt female and male mannerisms where they were in each other's bodies and stuff. It was really cool. It was just very thoughtful the way they did it. And
I think I would
that twist
choose
does it like
Perfect Blue.
a rock. Yeah, Perfect Blue is an excellent film too. Holy
I think
shit!
I would have to, if for no other reason than just to contrast, because
Oh yeah,
Perfect Blue
true.
does not leave you walk away feeling wonderful. Perfect
Or
Blue is a gritty, ugly view. It shows you what happens, or in how fame and how the fame machine can
yeah, the
completely
entertainment
crush
industry
and destroy
sucks.
someone.
Yeah, if you're out there and you've seen Oshinoko, because I know that's fucking massive. I've not watched it, but it's the same idea, just modernized. It's just not as good. It's just a not as good Perfect Blue. So, and Perfect Blue is much more concise. You don't watch 2 seasons of it. That's like all Oshinoko is. It's like the idea of how fucked the entertainment industry is and what it does to people that are in those like front seats, like the idols, the singers, the actors, and just all the bullshit they go through.
And I think it's not. I mean, while Perfect Blue is more the Japanese industry, I think it also applies to Korea and the United States and pretty much anywhere else. That story carries over regardless of what fame machine you happen to be sucked
Oh,
into.
100%.
It just happens to be keyed into the way that Japan's fame machine works.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not all that drastically different from other places. It's just there. Certain things are tolerated and looked the other way, where like it's basically out in the open, but nobody talks about it. Whereas here, it can't be out in the open. They just sweep it under the rug, but people still know it's there. They just don't look in that direction and they don't talk about it. And it's there's a lot of ugly things that happen to people. It takes a strong person to survive, and that's why you have people speaking out now about their experiences, like Drew Barrymore, who grew up as a child throughout the whole Hollywood system, and how she kind of believes that children should not be working in Hollywood at all, and like
I
they
get
should
online
just
with that.
like
Yeah.
she's
Give me the
like
CG
because
kids. If you need a kid, make it a CG kid. Put a CG child in there.
I think you can't tell a story without having children in it. Then it should be minimal. And if you're going to have a kid in there a lot, then you have to understand you're going to have to work around the limitations, because most of the movie studios don't do that. There are laws that say children can't work a certain amount, but they find ways to work around it, or ways to have hush people up and still keep the kids there. But a huge problem in Hollywood is that there's no oversight for the children. So the children, if they're the major breadwinners in the family, the parents start basically lose their way, because you're like, how do you tell the breadwinner in the family, the person who's bringing in $300,000 paychecks, that they have to go to bed at 6. Like, how do you do? And like when the kid realizes that they're the reason that you're surviving, or that they're bringing in a massive amount of income into the family, even if you're not using most of it, like it changes them. It changes how they grow up. It's hard to keep your kids grounded and humble when they've got all the money in the world and all this fame and shit like that. How do you insulate them from that? And during the 90s and the 2000s, like the whole Disney crew that had so many problems, like Britney Spears and Timberlake and that whole crew, all those guys, like they didn't have any guidance at all. They were just kind of, it was like a wild west in terms of how those
Yeah,
kids
that's why
grew
you hear
up.
all
So
those.
after that generation, Disney hired counselors and therapists that every child actor that works for Disney has to meet with, to keep their fucking brains in check so that
Yeah,
they don't get all demented.
no, yeah, definitely. Um,
Which they
yeah,
should
it's
have been doing
fucked.
since Jump. That's fucking common sense, but you know, it's Disney. Disney doesn't
Yeah,
give a shit.
yeah, definitely watch that though. Perfect Blue. I don't know where you could find it online. You can watch a silent voice on Crunchyroll, I think, can't you? I don't remember where we watched it. You
It
Google it.
was on Crunchyroll.
You guys are adults. You can find
I think
them.
it was also on
But that,
Prime.
but that's Papa Kyle and Papa Sean's recommendations to you today. But we got one more mailbag question to move on to before we wrap up the show today. It's from our boy Rat Jesus. Comes writing in. It says, what do you think about games that operate in a way where a huge choice at the start of the game dictates how your playthrough is going to be? Let's talk only in hypotheticals in here. Throw logistics such as time, cost, resource management for the devs out the window. Let's say a game comes out. It's a decently long game. A single playthrough takes around 50 hours, give or take, to complete everything. Maybe excluding true endgame stuff like secret super bosses. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But at the very start of it, or at least not too far into it, you are given a choice, either a yes or no, or even a multiple choice that will completely alter the way the story plays out and unfolds. You'll have different world states, different story beats, different characters that are alive or present, but still keeping the core aspects of the game, if not the same, then pretty similar. Essentially, you'd have 3 or 4 slightly smaller games within the actual game itself, but they are all different enough to be called as such. Do you think this would be a healthy direction for games to go? Would you prefer this over, say, a mega scale game that takes 150-ish hours to complete, but all takes place in the same world state? As you know me, I can't just submit one question, so I
What?
send in a question. So here's some follow up. Jesus Christ! What?
Well,
What?
but yeah, that first question was like 19 sentences long. Give me the
Yeah, yeah.
TLDR that I
Okay.
lost you.
Okay. General idea. So just as purely hypothetical, say there's a game that comes out where early on in the game you're given a decision and it changes the course of the rest of the game. Now
Heavy Rain.
the way he's referencing it, it seems as if this initial choice is the only one that's important. But I guess we'll introduce a hypothetical where, say, there's multiple choices later on that also that change the game world. And then he's saying basically, instead of it being one massive game that takes you a really long time to complete, they're more concise stories in that world that shift as you based on that initial decision. So say it's like some kind of psychological horror. It asks what your favorite color is or some shit. And then based on the questions you answer, now you're in your own horror story based on. I mean, didn't one of the Silent Hills do that? They had you take like a psych exam at the start, and it I don't know how much it actually changed, but I remember there being one Silent Hill where you took a psych exam at the start and then you go through. I think it was the one on the Wii or some bullshit.
Yeah, but that one,
I don't think it
depending
actually
on how you.
changed anything.
Uh, there are games that have done variations on that idea. Visual novels do it all the time.
Oh yeah, they're called
And
routes and shit. Yeah,
Heavy Rain did it to a degree.
which is effectively a visual
It's not
novel.
all right up front, but you make certain decisions, and then that changes how the rest of the game reacts. It's not uncommon, but it's not drastically changing the game to the point where it's a very different game on each playthrough. I mean, you might lose a character or a story thread or something, but the overall experience, for instance, in Heavy Rain or any visual novel, I mean, the visual novel, the story changes can change completely, and the endings can change drastically.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah, their
there.
endings
But in Heavy
shift
Rain, I wouldn't say that
insanely.
one playthrough where you lost characters is all that different than one where you didn't, or any of those horror games, the Man of Medan, that whole series.
Yeah,
Same thing as Heavy Rain, essentially.
Yeah,
Although the control schemes are a little less annoying.
I think that in a perfect world, if I can have a video game where it actually was the case where all my decisions mattered and there were like hundreds of different endings based on the way I played the game, I would adore that. Now, again, we're working in hypotheticals. I don't think this would work as easily in the real world, as we've seen many companies try it and have failed it and have not been able to deliver what they've said they were going to put out. But in that hypothetical, operating within it, I would adore that.
Fable, for instance.
I love the idea of decisions I make permanently altering the world I'm playing, especially in like JRPGs, anything like that. So having something like that, I am 100% down for. I would always play games like that, and I would be happy to see more games like that down the line if there was some kind of advancement in technology that made them more feasible, because it is so hard to have all these branching paths. The reason it happens in light novels so easily is because everything's just fucking pictures. You're not playing an actual game. You're reading a book usually. I mean, some of them get a little bit
Well,
more
it's a choose your
advanced.
own adventure. They write
Yeah,
X number of stories with X number of branching paths. They figure out all the paths in advance, and then they write a story to fit each path
yeah,
and how they can connect them. It's just the work is writing the story itself and then passing it off to an illustration guy. It's you're not having to create levels and
yeah.
textures and all that crap.
Yeah, but I would adore a game that actually came out and was able to promise and actually deliver on something like that. That is right up my alley. I love stuff like that. So I would 100% be down for at least a subset of games to move in that direction. Um, where they would they be feasible? Let me see if there's anything else here.
Even if
No,
they're
that's it.
feasible, that's not my kind of thing. I like stories being told to me, and I like being given a story that I can go and experience myself through that story. But I have very little interest in writing my own story around my decisions. It's just not something that excites me. It's boring.
I
I
mean,
spent eight
what
years of my life doing nothing but imagining nonstop bullshit, and then I finally got to play things. I like to experience other people's stories. I want them to show me a story and an experience. Let me go through things with the character. I don't want to be the character. I don't want to fucking be Link. Give him a goddamn voice. What the fuck?
but aren't you technically
Like
you are
you're
technically
telling me a story.
experiencing their stories. They're just variations based on decisions you're making. It's not
I don't
I'm not
want to lose out on being able to see this content because I made this other choice, and now I only get to see this one thing. And now I know that something else happened, but I have to fucking miss out on that because I made this other choice. Just tell me one story. I bought something, give me the whole experience when I play the fucking game.
and I
Don't make
guess
me play
couldn't
it
you just
19 times to get the whole experience. I don't like that.
okay.
It's just not something I've enjoyed because I don't look at I'm not like you and I can't play a whole game, get all the way to the end, turn around and play the same fucking game over again. Like I need to take a break and play something else. And like with these people, they'll play Skyrim like 19 times in a row to get all the fucking endings and see all the shit. I will never fucking do that. I don't have the time.
Well, he's
As
saying
an
here that
adult
these
with
are
a kid and responsibilities and shit like that, you don't have time for all that
yeah,
shit.
at least in reference to the question, the idea is to move away from things like Skyrim. Skyrim is the on the opposite end. These games wouldn't be Skyrim. Just for
And then
the
maybe I'm
sake of the question.
misunderstanding then.
He's saying they'd be smaller experiences that have more variation in the way you play through them. So instead of it being a 150-hour mega scale game, you play through one that has smaller. He has this exact thing. It says essentially you'd have 3 or 4 slightly smaller games within the actual game itself, but they're all different enough to be called as such. Prefer this in approach instead of mega scale games that take 150ish hours to complete, but all take place in the same world.
Okay, so then I'll change my response because I misunderstood. If you have
To be fair,
a
it's a hard
smaller
question.
scale game with a smaller scale price, then that's something that I would consider. But I still think bang for buck, the larger the game compared to how much money you're spending on it, is a better value overall. If the game is solid and it's a good game, then I'm going to go for the one that gives me more time per the amount that I'm spending on it. If it's a short game, if it's like a 2 or 3 hour game, then I better not be spending more than a couple bucks an
Okay,
hour on that fucking
say
game.
let's operate again within this hypothetical. Say if this game came out and you were making these decisions, you were playing it, and the game was vastly different. Like you were getting into completely fresh, interesting stories every time. So it's not like how games are normally, where if you want to see the 10 different endings, you do 90% of the same exact shit for 10% of something different. Imagine it flipped, where like you're 10% of the same shit, but 90% of the game is different. So it's like you have 4 games in one almost based
What's
on
the
your
amount of
decisions.
time? What's the average gameplay time that they're getting out of the experience, though?
Well, I mean, it'd be shorter than the 150-ish hour games, I would assume, according to this question. But he says playthrough takes around 50 hours. That seems like it's too long. Because some games, shit,
A
50 hours is a long
50-hour
time.
game is that's your average Square Enix game,
Yeah,
or at least it used to be.
but let's say if it was like 10 hours to get through the story, and you had like 4 or 5
40 hours.
like like insanely varied, well written stories that it's almost like you're just
So
playing
you
4 games
make
in
a
one.
handful of decisions, and it basically turns it into but you're so if these are different games, and you're not, it's not like you're making a decision, you're like, oh, you have to replay the whole game to be able to experience these other few moments. If it's like, all right, I made that decision, I got to experience this story. Now I make this other decision, now I get to experience this whole other story. That's a completely different concept. I'm down with
Okay.
that.
Yeah, imagine it if it's like this, to make it simple. Imagine if you start the game and you're given a multiple choice option to pick what character you follow throughout their story, and then you just have this 30-hour experience following that character. And then you get to see where maybe there's paths that cross amongst the stories, but most of it is unique to that character or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's fine. That's a fine idea, and I know that they've sort of tried that in some ways, but there's still a lot of overlap with those games up to now.
Yeah.
But
But
I'd be fine with that. I just don't like the way that it's handled now with
well,
the
yeah,
numerous
cuz
decisions but you're just missing out on chunks, and I don't like that. Just tell me a story and let me
yeah,
come along
it's
for
like
the
an
ride. I don't want
illusion
to
of
make my own
choice
story.
because it's not really even real choice. It's like an illusion of choice. Your choices really don't fully
Which
matter.
cutscene do you want?
Yeah, but I mean, to be completely I'm just trying to be generous here for conversation. But if it's exactly how he put it, how Alex put it, it would be like it seems like it's just a question they ask you at the start, and then you're thrust into this 50 hours of a story based solely on that question. But I don't know how much I'd be down for that. If it was like something where I was almost like a visual novel, but in game format instead of book format, where you're making decisions and you have these branching paths and there's wholly unique and different stories that you get to go down being in a game where you're actually doing stuff and leveling and shit like that, I'd be down for that. Now, obviously, that's not something I would solely play because I'm also a big fan of it being a very concise like band of characters that are all it's just one way to experience it. I like that too because in again the gaming environment we have currently, that's the best way to do it because you could put all your efforts into making that as detailed and passionate as possible instead of having to spread yourself thin with this other idea. But again, it's hypothetical. I don't even know why the fuck I'm talking about real world. But
I
I'd be
like
down with a
linear
game like that.
games, and you can still do linear games with lots of choices and
Oh yeah,
options in
yeah.
them.
They're linear. They're just linear in different directions. It's just a branching path. That's still linear. Yeah. Um that was an interesting question though. What else see? So I can't just submit one question when I send, so here's some follow-up. Why you gotta hit us with these machine guns, bro? What genre would best fit this type of game? If you want to be realistic, light novels or fucking whatever. Um
Dating sims.
dating sims. Well, I'm thinking of like
True.
yeah, I'm thinking of like Chaos Head. I'm thinking of like
Well, Chaos Head had a
Fate.
whole dating sim aspect to it.
Yeah, it did. I mean, you had paths you took.
Well, and what was it? What was the predecessor to that one?
Chaos Head
Because
was
there
the
was
first.
which one?
Chaos Head was the first. I'm pretty sure. And I
Oh yeah,
know
because I know that
Steins Gate
there's a
came
whole
later. Steins Gate was the biggest one, but Chaos Head was the first one. I'm pretty sure.
because there's okay, then that had a sequel.
Yeah,
Because there's like a Chaos Hack or Chaos
yeah. There's
something.
Chaos
There's a whole.
Child. I know that.
That's it.
If you see any of the ones that are separated by that semicolon, they're called like they're called like science adventure. It's like from that company. It's like a series. So there's like Robotics Notes. There's Steins Gate. Steins Gate's the biggest one. There's Chaos Head. There's Chaos Child, which I think came a little bit after Chaos Head. Chaos Head was kind of
That's
cool.
actually a related story, though. Chaos Head was terrible.
Oh, I mean,
Okay, let me rephrase. The book was probably fine.
oh,
The show
the
was
show was dog
terrible.
shit. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the game was cool because it had this cool. The idea was with the. I mean, I think the start of the I keep saying game. It's not really a game. You're reading through like a comic book basically, but um it was cool to start because it was almost kind of like a horror, and then eventually they get very shonen. It gets like goofy like shonen powers and that stuff I didn't like as much, but the idea was originally your character had a traumatic experience early on in his life and he starts to suffer from these delusions. And the way it worked in the game is there'd be a trigger when you got to certain points of the story, and you'd be given the option of choosing two delusions. You could either choose a positive or a negative delusion, and you'd get this weird like crazy cutscene thing to show that you're freaking the fuck out, and then depending on what you do, usually the positive delusions will just end up with you being in the room with the person with them being partially naked, and then on the negative side they'd experience horrendous gory deaths. But eventually the delusion system, they always had it like early on where at the end of the delusions it would cut out like if you were turning off like a CRT TV. Is that CRT? Is that what they're called? Cathode ray
Hmm.
tube TVs? Yeah. You know when you turn them off, they do that thing where it's like when they like shut off. When you turn off a cathode ray tube
I
TV.
just told you I know what a cathode ray tube TV is,
But
so I know
you
what
know
it's like when you turn it
okay,
off.
okay, okay. So they
Like
always do
by
that.
process of
Yeah, they always do that when
yeah.
the delusions end, but it gets to a point where you start to lose depending on when you're picking them. The whole idea is you don't know how reliable your narrator is because the delusions start to be meld into reality. So the things that made them delusions, you start to lose those aspects of them. So you get to a point where you don't know how far you are into your branch of that story, and you don't know how far you are in or out of said delusion because you lose the triggers that start to tell you what a delusion is or not. So you almost feel like you're in the character's head because you don't know how far you are into a delusion or if you're in the real world or not. It just gets really fucky. It gets very what's that movie with the hopping into multiple levels of dreams? Inception. It gets really like Inception-y levels of fucky, but you don't know what's reality and not. But yeah, the anime was dog shit. But I don't know how you effectively make a
I don't
show
even
like
know if
that.
I finished it. It was so bad. I didn't one of his toys come to life or something like that in the
Well, yeah,
beginning.
that's one of the delusions he has in the show, but it becomes like or in the book, but it becomes like a mascot in the show where like it is something that's so insignificantly small early on in the book. It's not like this ever existing character, but it's almost like a fucking mascot in the show. How often they use her,
Yeah.
but
Uh, and then like people were just dying left and right. It was awful. It was not
yeah.
good. And that made me turn away from like anything to do with that. Like it was so bad that if they were like from the makers of, I'd be like, nope.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the one that they did land, the Steins Gate adaptation was really good. I feel.
I heard the series was good too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm saying that's what I'm saying. The adaptation from the game
Oh,
to the series was good. It wasn't a Chaos Head adaptation.
Steins Gate
uh,
was like a fantasy adventure, right?
it was like it was a science time travel-y kind of show.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it was really good. But yeah, genre that best fit this type of game that we were talking about realistically would be a light novel type thing where it's easy to manage the branching and make the choices still feel somewhat impactful because I think it's too difficult because even the way you explained it, you're saying that you have one game that basically has four inside of it. Imagine trying to sell that to a dev team. It's just they're not going to want to fucking do it. I wouldn't want to fucking do it.
All
Um,
right. I'll tell you who suggested this.
Alex,
Alex.
your mom's
There's a
fat.
game called it's one of the it's published by Square. Hold on a second. There was a series of games that were started on Game Boy. Final Fantasy, I want to say Final Fantasy Adventure. Saga Frontier, that's it. No, I don't I haven't played all the Saga games. So I can't tell you about this entirely. And it doesn't give you a choice in the beginning where you're playing completely separate games. But there is a game that they just recently remastered in 2021 and put it on computer, and it's called Saga Frontier, which I believe is the fourth or fifth game in the series. I don't recall. I think each game is its own self-contained story, though. I never really got heavily into the Saga series, especially because most of it didn't come over here until much, 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 much later. Even then, only a handful of them are really easy to find here. And they're kind of a science fantasy thing, and all of the characters are doing their own stories. They are completely uninvolved with each other for the most part. Now, their stories do cross over from time to time where you'll happen to be in the same area as one of the other characters who is on their own quest, their own story, doing their own thing. And so you cross paths with them. They can join your team briefly. There's a lot of non-linear gameplay allowing you to freely travel among the different regions in the game and interacting with some of the other characters on their own stories. But overall, what the game is it's like 5 or 6 smaller JRPGs that add together to tell one overarching story. I think at the very, very end, in the last arc, I think they all come together to do something.
Sounds a lot like Octopath Traveler. That was exactly how
Oh,
Octopath Traveler was. You're like,
they might have taken inspiration from
they
Saga
they
Frontier.
probably did.
The problem I have with Saga Frontier is I'm used to being given characters that you fall in love with and you get to know them very deeply, and you go on these vast these vast journeys with them and see them grow. And that happens in every Tales game. It happens in every Final Fantasy game up to the ones that I've played. 15 didn't really have a lot of character growth in it, but 15 was weird, and everything since then has been weird. But most of them had character growth, and even if 13 was kind of a dumpster fire, you still had characters like Hope and shit like that that went through big changes. Same with Lightning. So you have these characters that you can kind of grow up with through the story, like reading a book, and you fall in love with relationships and paths that they've taken, and it's this epic journey. And you spend so long playing the game, you're playing them for 40, 50 hours, that you've really gotten to know these characters, and you have affection for them. And with a game that you're talking about where you're playing these shorter instances, it's harder to the thing that I found with Saga Frontier is it's harder to get attached to anything. I think I don't remember how long each of the chapters takes to play. You can play them in any order you want, and the order changes that you do changes when you meet characters, where they are, etc. So every time you play it, if you mix up the order that you play the chapters, it changes how the game plays in some ways. Like the general, obviously, it's not as advanced as what you're suggesting, but some characters may or may not be in the same place because you're doing it in different orders. So they're in different places. Shit like that will happen. But I just didn't get attached to anybody. I didn't really care about what was happening. The conflict overall didn't matter to me, and I wasn't given enough time to spend with anybody. So there's something to be said about a game, like if it's a platformer or a first person shooter or things like that, you're selling the game usually, even if it's got a great story, you're selling it on the action. You're selling it on the moment to moment set pieces and the big explosions and the cool shit you get to do. But when you're doing a JRPG or a visual novel or something like that, the story takes center stage. And you have to have time to love the characters and love the conflict and be afraid for what's going to happen to them and be involved in the story that you're getting. And I don't think that the type of thing that you're suggesting is an ideal fit for hardcore JRPGs because they need that narrative catch, and it's hard to give that in a short story form. Even in short stories written by amazing authors, you don't really fall in love with the characters. Those are usually more like fables or like little campfire tales and things like that. They don't give you somebody that resonates with you and stays with you forever. Like I can't think of a single short story that had a character in it where I was like, man, I really love that character. There's a lot of short stories I love, but it's not I'm not sitting there going, man, I really love that one character. That's really not what makes it resonate. It's the overall little story jaunt, or the nemesis and the how they got away with it, or how it caught the bad guy. It's the moments that stick with you more than the characters that are in those moments. So if you are doing a game like that with these short story vignettes that are, however long, maybe it's a 7, 8, 10 hour game, then you would have to be focusing on spectacle and style and mechanics and stuff like that. I don't think you'd be able to get as far with characters in a 10-hour game that you could in a game that takes 40, 50, 60 hours.
I
So I
mean,
think that would limit the stories you could tell with it.
I guess I think I don't know how much I agree with that. I think because people are able to do it with movies. So I think if you are
Such
good
as,
at what people are able to,
you talking about movies that do like the vignettes?
no, I'm talking people are able to make you become attached to characters within 2 to 3 hours and have them still be memorable. So I think if you could manage that within I think it just depends on if you're making the game from the ground up to be like what he's talking about. It's most likely, I think it would be doable. And again, he has said in the original hypothetical that they'd be like 40 to 50 hour stories. There'd just be 3 to 4 of them in a game. Now they're on the
I
lower
thought you were
ends, like
saying like if they were like 10 hours each or something. I don't know. I guess it could work. But I know that when I tried it with the few games that I've tried to play that were even remotely similar to what you were talking about, I didn't get that level of attachment. I don't think you attach the characters in a video game as quickly as you attach to characters on a movie screen. I think attaching to real life human beings moving around on the screen is a little bit different, and the way that movie storytelling is different than what happens in a game. I think it doesn't take as much for movies as it does for a game.
why I do agree with you, but that there's probably some scale on which that happens. Like movies can do it in 2 hours, so video games can probably do it in 10 to 15 hours. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's still possible to do it within a game's time frame. It's just what is that scale between movies to games? Also, games movies are always about the characterization because that's you're just watching. Or games, they have a lot of other things that have to be built up, obviously, with gameplay and all this other shit. You're not always working on characterizing the people in your story within a game because there's other shit you got to do, and then you obviously got to could account for people doing whatever the fuck they want to do. Um, what else was I gonna say? There was another point you brought up. I was trying to remember. I don't fucking remember. I ultimately think that as it's a cool idea to humor. I don't think like we were saying, I don't think it's technically not necessarily possible. But if there would be any type of genre that could do this, it will obviously be heavily narrative focused ones because that's the whole thing that's being shifted around here. Because the gameplay wouldn't necessarily change, at least the way you described it. So the things that would benefit from this type of doing something would be heavily narrative driven games. So any type of genre like that. So I can see JRPGs. I can see like the walking sim games, like Heavy Rain and shit like that, where there's just a heavy narrative focus. I can see these things doing well in. But if it was like a whole ass game, it would really depend on how uniquely different each of these branching paths ended up being, to want people to go and do it. Because I like the idea of, so say you learn about a character one way, you can easily build this up in a way where you've learned all this much about this character one way, but now you can take a look at that story from a different perspective. And I think games are really good at being able to do that and accomplish it in a way that's interesting in relation to you as the player, because they have so much control of how you walk through the world they build and how you travel through the world they build, that I think you could set up some really interesting ideas on how you would approach doing those characters in different ways if the characters are the same. But as it stands currently, it'd probably do best with games that are heavily narrative focused. We have not even finished the question. Let me read the rest of the question. It's not a whole lot left. But he says, what franchise could you see best handling this approach to branching narrative style games? If you have played a game that does something like this, what do you think of it? One such game I've played was Fire Emblem Fates, which was essentially 3 different games in the same world. Characters and such were the same, but the way they acted and which characters were on which side greatly depended on one choice you made at the start. Granted, all 3 games were full price, but that's why I said disregard logistics. I asked this because I don't want no goddamn illusion of choice. Fuck you, Telltale. And I mean, I get it. I don't like the idea of devs
The
coming out.
Borderlands Telltale games were good, and I like the Fairy Tale one too.
Yeah,
Batman one was dog shit. We don't talk about that.
I think for what they were pretty cool, and they were unique at the time. They kind of pioneered.
I don't think I'd do them again. It's
No, I
very much
wouldn't.
a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, and the end that you get is your story. You know, like you don't want to watch it and see the other dude's ending because that's not your ending. That's not what you work towards. You know.
Yeah, I tried watching one person play A Wolf Among Us, which is the one that got me into their games in the first place, was that game. And
yeah,
I was screaming at the screen, like, why the fuck are you choosing that? That's a stupid choice.
Yeah.
Pick the other choice, you moron.
Yeah.
Those are not games you want to watch. Just if it like watch about 10 minutes of it. If it looks appealing, just stop and buy the fucking thing.
Yeah, you're actively just spoiling the whole experience for you, because that is what the experience is unraveling the story for yourself. But I agree. I understand the idea of being frustrated with the quote unquote illusion of choice, where we've gotten a lot of games that tout the idea that, oh shit, yeah, every choice you make matters, but it ends up being like maybe 3 major ones over the course of the story, and it changes maybe a cutscene at the end. Fallout 3 was infamous for that. Todd Howard came out and he's like, oh yeah, there's like 60 something. I don't remember what the number he fucking used was. It was this insanely massive number. And there was actually only like 3 major endings. And then the rest of them were just like a picture at the end that was different to show what you accomplished. But 99% of the game was the exact same thing. So that shit, and like what Sean said earlier with Skyrim, I can see why that's not appealing. 100%. I don't like that either. But I think actively making a game like that does fully account for choice and shift the world and story, where you're actively molding it as you uncover it and go through it, that is so insanely difficult that I can't see it, at least in the current state that we have video games being made. I don't know how the hell they can accomplish that while still making the game like cool and fun and stuff like that. So I said stuff like that. Drinking game.
Yeah.
Drinking game. If you're listening, go back to the start. Listen again. That's my challenge to you. Take a shot every time you hear me say stuff like that.
Sit through this madness twice.
I'm gonna send people to the fucking hospital today. But yeah, we appreciate the question. Let us know what you guys think.
I don't entirely agree with you. I still think that it's you're asking for trouble if you're trying to stick that into a
narrative game,
like a JRPG kind of formula. But I'm not sold on my position entirely. Like I feel like I could be a little flexible on it, but it's still I'm a little less agreeable to it. My time with Saga Frontier just made me sad because I felt like I had betrayed Square, because I had loved everything they had published up to that point in time, and the game just did not connect with me. I mean, it was the first turn-based RPG that I played, and I fucking, up until that point in time, I'd loved every single one of them except for Beyond the Beyond, and even that one I was trying really hard. But this one just didn't connect with me because of the nature of stripping out what then was a 50-40 hour story into these bite-sized increments, and I didn't really care about the fucking characters. So if you could find a way to do the story, and like if it's like a 50-hour game, then obviously you're giving me enough time to get to know the characters. So if the chapters are long enough, then I think you could do a narrative thing just fine.
Yeah, I think
if the chapters are short, it's not going to work.
I think the problem we're having here, where we're not meeting, is that like we're hopping in and out of the hypothetical. So like I'm assuming from the hypothetical that it will be like a deeply narrative focused 50-hour experience. There's just 4 of them that exist that change based on your decisions. So when I think of it, I'm thinking of it in that light, and I could see it working only if it works exactly like that, and that's just not possible. So if you're looking at it from like a lens of like how games normally come out like this, like with your real world example, it just doesn't work because it's not something that's easily attainable. So I get it. And I don't think it is something that could be easily attainable. And I think 9 times out of 10, having it will probably lead to more problems than positives. But if it wasn't within this hypothetical where it's like it will all just perfectly work, I could see it allowing for some really cool opportunities. But I
It's a
just,
good idea to chase because that's how you innovate.
yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I think it's just such a. We're like on this like precipice with all this like generative AI shit. I'm very interested to see how it affects creative stuff moving forward, and what kind of doors get opened for technologies because of it, and how it accelerates the human creative process. I'm really interested to see what things might be possible moving forward because of stuff like this to help uh like uplift devs working through these creative processes. So
I think overall, I'm still inclined to lean much more heavily towards longer, more in-depth
definitely,
titles. But
I'm in the
but
same
bear
boat.
in mind, I've been trained by decades of gaming experience where like I went out and spent $60 on a game or 50, $60 on a game and then got a an 8-hour experience and walked away going, what the fuck did I spend all that money on?
Mhm.
And I mean, there was a time period where getting a 10-hour game felt like a ripoff before
Yeah,
that became a standard. But in those 10-hour experiences, while the experiences themselves were fine, you just expected more for your money because up until that point, if somebody was going to give you a game, normally you had a longer playtime with it, especially in the games that I was normally buying, which was JRPGs and RPGs and like longer fantasy experiences. So that's just kind of where I come from with that. So anytime I look at a game, I'm looking at how much time am I going to be spending with it? Like how much am I going to get out of this? Is it going to be rewarding the money that I've spent that I worked so hard on? Am I going to be getting that much money's worth of playtime out of this? And that's really not how games are anymore. That's not how you should be viewing them, and that's really not how they function. Now, 10 hours is an intentional thing. Like, and I get now a little bit, or like later on in my life, like in my 20s, you wouldn't catch me buying a game that was a 10-hour game unless it had like Bayonetta. I think was the first game that I was willing to invest money in. That's basically a 10-hour game, and that was only because it was platinum. And it was the same guys that had worked on like the original Devil May Cry and shit like that. So that it was the heritage that sold me on that game, not the playtime.
yeah. I
Now
mean,
that's normal. Like every Call of Duty game is designed to be a 10-hour game. It's a very standard time frame for your typical game series. So it's viewed very differently than the way I'm used to looking at things.
I guess it depends where you look. I'd say if you were to look on an average for playtime for completion for games coming out, it probably sits between like the like 40 to 50 hour mark. Like if you look at like every game that ever comes out, I think they generally probably fall around that time frame. But yeah, Call of Duty is definitely on the lower end. Um, but I'm right there with you. I love long stories. I love getting like timed for things to develop and get fleshed out. I mean, shit, one of my favorite games of all time takes like 500 hours to complete the fucking story, and that's Final Fantasy 14. It takes fucking forever to get through all that story. I mean, it's like 10 years of
Is it up
story.
to 500 now?
Oh, I don't know what it actually is. I mean, I have like 4,000 hours in the fucking game, but most of that's like doing raids and sitting idle, listening to bands in the towns and shit. So I don't know. I wonder though. Final Fantasy 14 time to complete MSQ.
There's going to be an average.
Uh, this is 6 months ago. It's saying around 170 hours of pure MSQ, not including side raids or class jobs, etc. So,
That's a lot less than what I would have thought.
oh yeah. Oh, but this one says 200 to 310 for story alone. So I don't know. I'd say each time an expansion comes out, it's between like 40 to 50 hours to complete the story for it, like the expansion. So you consider there's, I were to just do like quick maths and shit. How many expansions are there? There's Realm Reborn, there's Heaven's Word, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, and Dawn Trail. That's 6. And then 6 times 40 to 50. Yeah, that sounds about right. 2 to 300s, low
I guess when you're
300s.
thinking MMO, there's such a time sink that's other things involved, and you just kind of
No, yeah, this is pure MSQ
view
though.
it all as one experience, when in reality, it's hundreds of different little experiences
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
one long experience in the middle.
This is people calculating just watching the cutscenes and stuff though, and doing the quests.
Well,
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I'd consider most of my time playing that game is not necessarily doing MSQ. It's like doing raids and stuff. And but yeah, those times will vary widely with MMOs. It is crazy how big of a initial investment it is though in that game. It's so fucking worth it though. It's crazy. But yeah.
speaking of which, I think one of them just had a expansion drop. Guild Wars
Guild
2,
Wars
I think, just
2.
had an
It has
expansion
one.
drop.
It has one coming out. I don't know if it's open
Or it's
yet.
like right on the cusp then.
Yeah, I know there's one coming. WoW's is coming soon. I don't know about any others, but I know WoW is around the corner. I think it's like in a month time. Maybe it might be this month, or maybe the start of next month. I don't know. And then yeah, Guild Wars is soon too. Yeah, Guild Wars is okay. I
It's
wasn't
an
a big fan
interesting
of that.
question, Alex. I really don't know. I mean, Kyle's brought up some valid points. I still have some trepidation with the idea, though. I just remember being very, very disappointed with my story experience with Saga Frontier, and that has had me ever since then with the very, very, very careful around any game that claims to give you a whole bunch of different stories, because of how unfortunate that one felt. Because if I'm playing a game for a long time, I want to love the characters that I'm playing with. I want to love the story I'm involved with, and you need time and exposure for that. So if Kyle's example of each chapter being, or maybe you said it, of each chapter being like, say 40, 50 hours, and I think, yeah, that's 100% doable. But I think if the chapters are more like 10-hour things, then your game is going to need to focus a little less on story. I think if it's a short form thing and a little more on the varied experiences, maybe one gives you a badass shooter experience and another one's a badass platformer or something. They could all be telling the story in the same world. But even then, I don't know. That would make it difficult for the audience to connect if you're giving different genres. I don't know. I really don't know how that would work. You'd have to have a really talented dev team and a little bit more, I think, technology with the storage space for something like that, because I imagine that game would have to take up a lot.
Yeah, it would depend. It really depends how it would depend how unique and varied each additional playthrough is. Like if you're going to whole new continents because you made a decision here, yeah, that would require a lot. But I mean, the way technology works nowadays, you can fit so much. If again, if it's a talented team, you could do a lot with the way we compress data now. It's crazy. All right.
Oh, speaking of the streaming, Perfect Blue currently is streaming on Shudder and Apple TV. You can rent it on I'm sorry, it's also part of the AMC subscription. The Amazon, I think it's, you can rent it on Amazon. Looks like that's it. Apple TV, rentable on Amazon. It's on Shudder. It's on Crunchyroll
Oh, it is. That's
and
cool.
AMC Plus. And as
I think it's
for
on. It's probably
silent
on.
voice,
Probably on YouTube
let's-
too. They're pretty good about having
uh,
you just watch it for
it
a
didn't
couple
show
bucks.
YouTube on this one, but
Uh,
probably. Silent Voice is on Apple TV. You can rent it on Amazon.
it's on
It's
Crunchyroll.
on Crunchyroll. Yes, they're on. Oh, I'm sorry, Microsoft. You can rent it from Microsoft. That's it.
Yeah, that's crazy. This movie
I didn't know Microsoft rented movies.
has 9,169 reviews on Google, like Google out all things, and it's sitting at a 4.9 out of 5.
A Silent Voice.
Yeah,
It earned it.
that's wild. I wonder what this is on my anime list. It's not that big a deal. All right. Well, We appreciate the questions as always, you guys. If you want to write in and have us discuss something you want to know more about us, want to know more about things we like, dislike, feel free, write in, let us know. Links will be down below. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. We always appreciate you guys tuning in. Please join the Discord. That's probably the hub for our community. So we're all chilling, talking, hanging out. Got a bunch of people chilling in the Discord. That'd be the best way to get in contact with us. So come over and say hi. But, Sean, I think the people require something from you.
Hugs and kisses and all your pink parts.
Hell yeah, dude. That's a Pogger statement right there. But we're going to go ahead and sign out. Let someone you know that you love them. Tell them you appreciate them. Hang out with them. Make sure they're loved. And we'll see you guys later.